Hey, how you doing out there, everybody? Welcome to our latest conversations with the three Black Pratt grads. My name is Kenneth Nelson. I'm here with my very good friends Mark Skinner in the dark and Greg Cleghorn. we're, we're all photography graduates from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and we are here to discuss most things photography. Today is a topic that I brought up today because I've just been mulling it over for about the past 3 weeks, and it has to do with the amount of time that you spend with your images. In this day and age of Instagram, Facebook, and what is it? I think it's like 5 billion images are loaded to Instagram in a very short period of time. The thought just comes to my mind as to what is a good representation of time or sufficient representation of time to spend with your images to validate the production of your images. So I'll read the script that I have. How much time do you spend with your images? With the amount of images a photographer is liable to make or to shoot over their lifetime, what amount of time can be deemed as sufficient to confirm a photographer's appreciation of their photographic works? And the reason why I bring this up is I have some black and white film that I shot back in 2011, 2013. And so I decided, okay, I'm going through the stack and I realized that I never scanned them. So in essence, I never saw them. So I haven't seen them in 7 to 9 years. And so if I've taken a photograph 7 to 9 years ago and I haven't seen it, does it really exist? Equated to if a tree falls in the forest and no one's allowed down to hear it, did it still fall? You know,
Wait,
Great.
did this is when you were shooting film?
Yes, I was shooting film.
Did you tape mark the canister to
Oh,
know what?
no, and here's the thing about it is I processed the film already. All the
Oh, you
film is
did.
processed, right? So
Okay.
it's not unprocessed, just sitting there in stacks and stacks, just there. And so as I'm going through these stacks, I'm starting to say to myself, what value do these images have if I didn't miss them since the time I shot them? What value is it?
Well,
What does it
I
mean
think
to
you're,
me?
but I think you're asking yourself the wrong question. I think the question that you substituted is, what was my goal when I photographed these images when I first did them? If you knew what your goal was, then you would know the value to you of these images 9 years later. If you were just testing out a new camera, or if you were just testing a lighting scenario, or if you were just wanted to see how sharp a lens was, and you knew that answer, as soon as you saw the negatives, you go, oh yes, that's what that is. But
Yeah.
if you don't remember what your goal was when you photographed these images, then you're asking, well, how valuable are they? Because now you're looking at them and you're going, you don't remember what the objective was.
No, I remember what the objective was because in everything I shoot, the objective is always to share the images. That is the ultimate goal. That has
Well,
been the ultimate goal.
then that question then becomes, if the goal was you're shooting to share,
Hmm.
right?
With people
What
outside of
was
itself.
what was the message you were trying to share at the time of production? I mean, it still goes back to what was your photographic goal, not necessarily your business goal. Your business goal was to share images, to have, media to publish. But what was your at the moment goal when you took a picture? I mean, if you took a picture of a manhole cover, you're showing something about the manhole cover. It's either, the way the light hits the manhole cover, the way the
Yeah.
manhole color cover has worn over years, or whether it's brand new and it's
Mhm.
shiny like a penny. There's some attribute to that subject that was interesting enough for you to photograph it. But what
Yeah.
was your goal in creating the image? Not what was your goal for that because your goal is always the same, to create images that you can share with the public. That's your mission. What was your goal that day?
I think I don't know if they can be separated. I think they're eternally one and the same. Uh,
Not eternally. I mean, what happens is well, all of our goals, everyone who calls themselves a photographer, and for that matter, anyone who calls themselves a filmmaker is sharing some sort of story, some sort of some little story, some bit of life. We're all doing exactly the same thing. So that is your mission, your work's mission, your life's mission on a global sense. But in the macro sense, what is that? What was the goal for the day? I mean,
Yeah,
if I
well,
go take a pic, if
the
I go
goal
take pictures of a model, go ahead.
the goal of each day is to go out and photograph, right?
Right,
Now and
right,
see what you see.
right.
So
Now is it truly for you that that open a mission so that like whatever's there is completely open, or do you make a point to go to specific places for a particular type of image that you're going to get?
no, and the ones that and here's the thing about this particular roll of film. This particular roll of film was shot in 3 different places over the city,
Right.
right? And so the mission was not in any way, shape, or form focused on any individual idea. It was
Okay.
just walk and basically to walk aimlessly and see what I
Okay.
see and photograph what I photograph.
Okay, and then so 9 years later, you weren't lucky, so to speak, because you didn't have a particular objective. What was your, at the end of the day, they weren't as valuable to you. They certainly weren't valuable enough to scan, to print, to go past the negative. And so 9 years later, you're looking at them again, and you're going, well, maybe there's some gold in there that I haven't seen before, or maybe they weren't that valuable, and I made the right choice.
Well, yeah. Let's say, for instance, that on average you get one keeper out of a roll of film, right? And if you have
Right,
seen 20 rolls of film, you've missed 20 keepers, right? And so,
right.
what does that mean to you to miss 20 keepers, especially for something that when you see it again, you're like, "Oh man, I shot this. Oh man, why didn't I see this before? What could I have done with this before had I remembered that I had it? What
Well,
was
you're
the
implying now that there's
motivating factor to move me to do something that I wouldn't have done had the image been already in my head in the forefront?"
Well, you're implying now that there's value to whatever it was you were working through at that time to you now, because at whatever point you took those photos, you were on the beginning of this journey towards a particular style or a particular light or a particular whatever it was. And so now, when your creative vision is a little bit more solidified, you are recognizing in your earlier work the elements of that kind of led you there, but you're wondering now, well, is this really great or is this not? I think there's something to be, you have to trust that your earlier self understood this is all the information I need at this time. I put it aside, and then you went on to something else. And now that you can go back and you can go, it's valuable, there may be gold, but if there are 20 keepers, you now know what it was that you liked about those images in the first place, when back then you probably weren't so sure.
And well, there are layers upon layers of what's going on, and one of them, I mean, a couple of layers is that, well, I was doing full-time work, so I didn't have enough time to actually do a contact print of a lot of the negatives. So therefore, that was missing. So I didn't see a direct positive of the negatives that I was looking at. So therefore, I didn't have a good representation of what I was looking at, because looking at a negative and looking at a negative, you can't really tell, you know. So I was doing full-time work, and I didn't do that. And it's only now as I'm scanning that I'm seeing things that I would have seen had I made the contact print. And
Mm-hmm.
so not being able to make a contact print due to either a lack of time, a lack of finances, or a lack of ability to do a contact print was the basic reason why I didn't see these from that time on. Not for a lack of not wanting to see them, but not having the ability to actually work through to get to see a contact print, which would have solidified my view on these. Go ahead, Greg.
I hear what you're saying,
Uh-huh.
but whew, it it's demanding that I ask, like, what is your workflow then? I mean, is that a one of thing, or when you go out and shoot, do you have a workflow? You know, you get back home, fire up the computer, slap the disk in, and then see what you got, decide what you, or do you just, get back home, put the disc and the camera down, go make dinner, watch the evening news, see some Family Feud, and then you get to it when you get to it. Because I know you guys are the super organized. That sounds like,
It,
excuse me, I hate to say it, but that sounds like something I would do.
Yeah, but let's say you're in a situation where for whatever reasons you finished shooting, you just didn't have time, and you never went back, right?
right, right,
Right.
mm-hmm.
So
I was
whatever that
asking about the
constraint was,
workflow.
right? But what I'm saying is, even in the workflow, there's a point where you said, "I can't do this now. I have to go to bed," or "I can't do this now. I'll have to go buy paper," right? Because you're talking film, right?
Uh-huh.
And was this done at a time when you had the ability to scan?
Uh, yes, it was. It would have 2013. Yeah, but it wouldn't have been a great scan. But I could have attempted to do it.
I think that what happened was maybe I'm wrong, but I think you looked at the photos, and knowing what photographic, I mean, you know at that point you had been looking at black and white negatives for what, 20, 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
You looked at that, you remembered the scene you photographed, and you looked at the negative, you interpreted it, and you went, do I really feel like scanning all this? Nah. And you ingested whatever it was you wanted to get out of that, and
Yeah,
you just kept moving.
yeah,
And now when you're looking back, when your style is more solidified, you're looking back at this archived material, and there's sentimentality, and then there's also the merits of the beginnings of that work. I mean, look, if anyone looks at a Model T, right, and then you look at a Jeep from the World War II, right, there are a lot of things that are very similar to the way they're constructed, right, but in between there's a bunch of airflow cars and big bulbous cars with lots of fender. You know what I mean? There's a lot that you went through, but there are merits to where you started. And I think that's what you're talking about now. How much merit does this old material have for you?
I
no,
don't know.
it's
Yeah, you answer that one, Ken. I got something to say.
yeah. It's for me. It's different. For me, I have an intense emotional admiration for my images, and for me, I'm beating myself up because I know I should have done better than this. I should have worked to establish more of a pile of something I can actually look at and verify. And I'm not. And again, I'm
A
reason why
pile.
I
I
bring this
cannot. I cannot. I cannot accept that you consider your work a pile ever.
up. I have okay. Just so you know, I have a pile of negative files right onto
A
to the right of
stack.
a stat this big, about I'd say about 12 inches tall. Okay, of just two medium format negatives. And so at some point, I was scanning over the years, but I only scanned about that amount of the film that I had processed, where there's that much more that I have yet to scan. And it just, there was never enough time to do it. And of course, what I'm looking at is I'm regretting it, basically, because, that's time I could have done, but I don't. Now, granted, as Mark says, you now have time to reflect on those images and take a second look at this. And we see throughout history that many photographers have done the same thing. They've just shot, never looked at their work until years later. And to some degree, most people, a lot of photographers say it's hearsay that they don't come back to their work for a year or two later so that they have a perspective on it that that's no longer relevant to the immediate time that they photographed it. I mean, to each his own. I don't
What
necessarily
is
like that or
this?
subscribe to that idea. Many photographers subscribe to that notion that they just take their images, digital or not, they put them away and they don't look at them for a while. Whether that's 3 months, 6 months, a year, I don't know. But it's not something I want to do. It's something I've never subscribed to do. But yet, and what's interesting is what's carrying over is that carryover that I did with the film actually, and to Greg, to your point, I've been carrying that over to the digital realm as well. As you say, you go out, you shoot, 150 frames. You come back, you download them, and you're like, I'll get to it another day. Meanwhile, the next day you go out, you shoot again, another 150 frames. You come back, you download them, you say, I'll get to that 300 later. And before you know it, 2 months have passed and you haven't gotten to it yet. So I'm still looking at images I've shot at in 2016 digitally that I'm editing out now. And so what I'm thinking is to myself is, if I'm shooting 150 frames in a day and I can't edit down to the ones that I like to a strict one, then what's the use?
See,
Because
I think Greg said it. Go ahead, Greg, because I
No, go
think
ahead.
you guys gonna say I think Greg's got a very valid point. It's about whatever your work process is. I mean, and I think it has to do. See, here's the issue is that if you're saying you go to shoot and whatever happens and you catch it, you don't catch it, whatever happens. And I know that when I take a photograph, there's always an objective, you know. I mean, I'll find myself at home. I'll just grab a camera because there's some attribute of the photographic process I want to explore. I want to check out how to do some sort of lighting trick, or I want to check out, what the minimal focus is of a lens, or whatever the technical attribute is. I'll do that here in the house, right? And then sometimes when I do street photography, I just kind of want to check ideas. I want to see what things look like. I want to see how things render. And for me, every time I photograph, there's always some intention. And even when I do the very minimal amount of street photography I do have a specific intention. And there's, I want to see what autumn looks like. I want to see, now in a particular place, or I want to see how the light bounces off a building, or where the birds are. I mean, whatever it is, or what people are wearing and what they're doing, whatever it is, there's always intention behind whatever it is I photograph. And without the sort of the assignment, the self assignment. I mean, it's weird because I know you have a self assignment, but the scope is so big. I mean, you have ongoing projects. You have, specific sets of photographs that are accumulated over years to be a document of a particular time and place, and a particular type of, or what people are doing in these places at these times. And so the idea that your daily shooting doesn't have a particular goal, I think maybe you might be cheating yourself a little bit, and you might want to sort of hone it down to find the essential images for every one of your project. I mean, if you go out and you say, I want to photograph skateboarders. Well, there's only so many places people skateboard that are public. When you go to those places, you'll find where the hidden skateboard places are. You'll discover people skateboarding in places that aren't really publicized. And you can either kind of go to these places and keep photographing, the same 5 skateboarders, or you can make a big project out of it and really get granular with your understanding of the skateboard community, and do the skate shops and the boards and the manufacturers and all, and you can really hone it down to something and really build a comprehensive story about what skateboard culture is. And I think if you have a daily goal, and you say, well, today I'm going to get the skateboarders under the Brooklyn Bridge, or today I'm going to go get the skateboarders in such and such playground. You know what I mean? then you know, boom, that's what it's like there. That's what it's like there. I'm going to get the guys in the board shops. This is what it's like at a board shop. This is what it's like when people were putting the wheels on the boards. Oh, today I'm going to contact a manufacturer, see if I can get it. This is the factory. You know what I mean? And so that daily assignment will help you kind of hone down those projects to bigger story, fewer pictures.
Greg?
Yeah. What I hear you guys saying goes back to what that conversation we had about social media, in that I don't know, the picture doesn't really, I mean, it can be a great picture or a terrible picture in our heads, but it doesn't really come to life until we share it. You started off the conversation with, oh, there's 35 million billion, well, there are 45 billion pictures on the internet,
Uh-huh.
but they're really not anywhere until you share them with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And and especially Mark just said, talking about assignments. Like one of my old editors told me, if you didn't shoot it, it didn't happen. And if it's something that's timely, then you showing it to me 2 years later, it's like, so what? Or if you have something that's evergreen, it's gonna be evergreen. It's gonna be beautiful. Like you guys were talking about, you could have shot it last week, last hour, or in the last decade. If it's a good shot, it's a good shot, period.
Right.
Like your Black Lives Matter shots, and good fashion shots or something like that. Those are the iconic images. But again, if you don't show them, you don't share them. Not that they don't have value, but they haven't blossomed. Let me say that. I won't say they won't exist.
They don't exist.
They exist because
Right.
you shot them.
Right. Well,
you haven't shared them.
Right? Because say, for instance, do you like if you go out on a shoot and you shoot 300 frames, do you really remember all the 300 frames that you shot?
I don't know.
Most
when
of
I
them.
go out and shoot, I
Subjects?
remember. I may not remember every shot I shot,
Right.
but I remember the shots that I want.
Exactly.
If I get something that's outside of my normal portfolio, or if I get a
Right.
shot where it's like, oh, if I do this, like skateboarding, if
Uh-huh.
I get real low and I get the skateboarder with nothing but sky behind him,
Mm-hmm.
I know that's going to be a unique shot that I could do a lot of things with.
Uh-huh.
And that's the shot I would get excited about.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Right, but for me, 300 photos really is, I shouldn't say a day's work, but it really is part of one assignment. Like, let's say I'm photographing, a pageant winner in front of a particular place, maybe the
Right.
pageant winner in a studio. There's 10 of this pose, 10 of that pose, 15 of this, 15 of that. Sometimes the eye is blinking, sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
There's so many variants within sets, but I try not to come home with 300 of the exact same thing.
Right.
I try to come home with 300 with maybe, I don't know, at best 10 variants of each, so I can get 20, 30, 40, maybe I get 40 separate photos of an individual. I mean, my galleries tend to have between 30 and 70 images for every time I photograph an individual.
Right.
And that's a tremendous amount of photos, but I try to make sure that they have enough to choose from. I may like their pose, but they go, no, my leg is in the wrong place, or my arm, I don't like my shoulder this way, or I like it this way, that kind of thing. So for me, it's always an objective, but I understand, sort of, walking the street, getting these street photos completely impromptu. I get it. It's just that at this point in my process, I always have an aim.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that would be the difference between photographing a sitting or a model shoot versus photographing street, which is just a little bit more much more free form.
Well, weddings
I,
are like
I
that.
got a,
Weddings are very free
I got a
form.
question for you. If you talk about assignment shooting, let's say, what's the difference? I'm gonna put this in this kind of like I'll go back to Israel, and that little voice said, "Wait right here. Something's gonna happen. Just wait right here. Get ready." Had the camera up and everything, and these two old guys walked to the edge of the frame, and they stopped and they raised their hands and waved at each other, and I froze. I saw it, my mouth open, but I couldn't fire the trigger. Now, what's the difference between like you go to a wedding or an assignment and you see a shot, but either you freeze or you don't take it or you miss it, the moment passes? Is
Mm-hmm.
that the same as shooting a bunch of stuff, not being thoroughly, taken with it, and then not even bother going back?
Well, I think with something like a wedding, you have to know exactly what
Whew.
your aim is. I mean, your aim is really cover the
Well,
bride and
you
groom.
have a checklist. You know which
Yeah,
shots you
right.
have to
And,
get.
and that and
You
that's
got
what
to
I'm
get
getting
the
at because
kiss. You got to get the,
right, because even Roy Stryker for the Farm Security Administration had a shoot sheet for his photographers, a good amount of the 35 millimeter and sometimes 4x5 and all these different formats. Some of the great black and white photographs that we all admire, once we get past the French photographers, the 35 millimeter ones, and we get back to the United States, some of the great black and white photographers, Parks and Lang and a bunch of others, they ran with Roy Stryker's shoot sheet. And that shoot sheet would say, okay, this is what an old country doctor does. He's, assists in a birth. He helps.
Uh-oh, he froze.
Yeah, let's.
So keep
Oops.
going. Go
He'll come
ahead.
You,
You
back.
froze up for a
you,
second there.
you can't get, right. I'm sorry. There's a list of photographs that you can get for the story, right? But we look at all these individual photographs like, the photograph of the migrant woman with her two children, where she has her hand like this, and that's particularly poignant and reminiscent now in this time because we're going through a similar economic strife and hunger for everyone, so it
Yeah, but
resonates with all of
since you
us.
brought that picture up,
But
have you seen the
but
context
but
of
that
that setting? Because there are
right
like about
right but
10 different images that aren't as good.
Right.
thank you. That's what I'm saying, and what I'm saying is,
Oh,
it wasn't just walk, snap, and walk away. This person really, really gave a lot and sat and posed and was there, with her, and so they had an assignment. You know what? Try to photograph what the people must be feeling if they have to, go from the Midwest to California just to seek food and work and shelter.
Yeah,
So that's part of.
you're right. But I guess what's happening here is we've sort of leveled actually off the topic in which we were discussing because we were discussing the images that you haven't seen, not the images that you have seen, because it's an assignment. Therefore, it's incumbent upon you on an assignment to make sure all your images are accounted for at the time you have to submit your assignments in. Okay, so though that's sort of a different context. The context I'm referring to is your own images that you haven't seen, and because you don't remember what they were until you
But
see them again years later.
what you're talking about, my friend, is the mythical Gary Winogrand cache of unseen images by the photographer, right? All these thousands of rolls that were never processed. You're alluding to that. I mean, that's like the whole. That's the
Well,
big.
that's
That's
the big
that's
story that of
that's the
there,
big
but
story,
yeah, but it
right?
doesn't really relate. It's not about him per se. It
Right.
can be to anyone who uses an Instagram or social media account that has a backlog of images on your phone that you've
Mm-hmm.
not seen or not uploaded because you just haven't gotten to it yet. So if you took 20 pictures of your plate at the restaurant, and you really didn't post it, but you liked the food because it was great. And a year later, you remember that you went to that restaurant. The memory of that restaurant is the photograph of the plate. That's the value of it brings back to you. You know, that
Right,
emotional,
but
right?
right,
That emotional, the time and the memory are the key. You know,
right.
it's
But I mean, I saw a house with a Christmas tree in the front, actually the Christmas tree, but had evergreen in the front, and they decorated like a Christmas tree. I thought that was just absolutely the cutest thing in the world to see, and because you know, I'm here in Brooklyn, and it's something I know as a young person I would not have seen just the tree. You know, people would either decorate the house and the stoop and all of that, but this was just the tree, and like it was a Christmas tree from a department store. No ornaments, just lights, and I thought it was just really cool. So I took a picture with my phone. Did I share it? No. Did I post it? No. I just thought it was really nice, a nice idea. And it was something that I realized later in the back of my head, it was something I always wanted to do for myself, but I don't have an evergreen. You know, I'm not going to buy an evergreen. I'm not going to plant an evergreen just so that I can take a picture of a Christmas tree at this point in my life that's, you know, decorated at night. That's just not going to happen. But what I'm I guess what I'm getting at is what you're saying is to some degree we all have these images that we take, but that has to do with the ability, the ease of being able to take pictures. But when you're a professional and you're shooting film, you have a certain level of intention. You're buying film, you're putting film in a camera, you're going to a place, you're taking a picture. In this case, you even processed the film, and you're wondering at what point you'd made contact sheet. Well, you didn't make contact. You cut them up, right? You didn't leave it
right,
hanging, right?
right,
You cut them, you put them in sleeves,
right.
and you looked at them and you went, later.
Yeah, I said I know I'd get back to them, but I never did.
Right. So I guess the question I have now is, would you at this point begin scanning and cataloging all of that material uh, in a way that, are you going to do that, or are you doing it?
That's what I've been doing for the last 3 weeks. That's what
Well
brought this
then,
question up to my head,
mhm.
which is, holy cow, this is a great shot. Why didn't I look at this before with the intent that I have now? Oh, I got to scan this in, so now it's in there. So now I have references to it, so I can quickly use it when I want to, because that image to me has the excitement and the movement that I know I enjoy in my images, and it just takes me back to when I was shooting that film. And I'm like, wow, man, okay, so if I did this with this image, and I've done it
Mhm.
hundreds of other images, what am I, you know, and I'm internalizing all these things, all this angst, because it's like, this is stuff that I should have gotten to before.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. There's a sentimental, you have sentiment about the images now that you're seeing them. You know, it becomes more of a photo album in some regard, and it's a photo album that's tied to your craft. You
It
know,
is, but it's also about possibilities. It's also about images that can now be used, that I now have a visual reference for that I didn't before. That had I remembered I shot it, I would
hmm
have scanned it with much more intent to keep it in
well,
the
well,
forefront of my mind.
well, that's what I was saying in the beginning. Now that your style is, or whatever it is that you know you would love in a photograph, you're more sure of what your photographic requirements are. And so now that you're more sure of that requirement, you can look back at your less sure times, and you can be better at editing. Perhaps you just needed to become a better editor.
Yeah, I think you're no, I think you're not getting what, well, at least I understand what you're saying, but it's not really accountable to me because at that time when I was shooting, I know what I was going for and I knew what I would have liked. So
Right.
therefore, the notion that I was at a different period in my life, but I was not at a different visual acuity for photography in my life.
hmm
That was and continues to be the visualization that I continue to use now. It's not at its infancy when I was using it. It was at its nice level where, because I was shooting this stuff and I'm like, wow, this is an intriguing shot. Okay, and it would have been something that I would continue to use throughout time, just like the decisive moment would have been used throughout time, over the period of his lifetime. You know,
So
that
so now so now
that
that you know what it is that you like when you see these resurrected photographs, what you really need to ask yourself is, what is it about this set that made me look at the negatives and go, yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's I think to some degree that's too simplistic, because I don't think I ever went to that level of not caring, because I was always caring about the work. I just didn't have the ability time wise to do the work, and
Okay.
therefore it slipped my mind. And
Okay.
so now I'm
Hire an
regretting
intern.
the fact that I slipped my mind.
Hire a
Well,
fat intern.
but I guess I mentioned that before. There's a point where you said, "Well, I got to go to bed
Yes.
because I got to
Yeah.
go get up in the morning."
Right.
I mean, and that's valid too. But I guess the question then becomes: is why were those particular images uh, at a certain value where you felt like you could keep moving? That's the question you need to ask yourself
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
able to answer for
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like what was it about that set that made you say, okay, I got my information, I can do better? Because if you didn't feel you could do better at that second, you would have definitely printed those.
No, because Greg, Mark, there are literally hundreds of negatives that I would have liked to have print over the
Uh-huh.
last 15, 20 years that I've never printed.
You need to apply for a grant.
Yeah.
Ask the
I
museum
agree.
for a grant, because that'll give you incentive to print. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
there it is.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I guess the answer is still open, because I guess yeah, there is no definitive answer, I would suppose. There are ideas surrounding the answer to the question I posed, but I guess there's no uh
A picture isn't a picture until it's shared. You guys keep talking about assignments and clients and for social media, and I think it's kind of moot unless you show it to somebody.
yeah.
That's just my opinion. That's all I got.
Mark, anything else?
No, no. I mean, I think that Greg's right. You should apply for a grant, but I also believe that there's certainly a reason that you don't have yet for why you felt the need to continue and not return to them earlier. And I still believe, because I know for me, if there's any photograph it either doesn't have that much value, or it had only sentimental value, or I mean, I have plenty of photographs that I have photographed that I never post because I didn't feel that they were the best of what I could do at the time, given the parameters with which I had to work. And I think when I do look at older work and reassess, I think there's a level of sentimentality, and I think there's also a level of artistic maturity that older artists have regarding their own work that allows them to be more decisive about the editorial value, about being editorial about their earlier work, when at the time, because they were in the midst of a search, that search precluded the ability to really be sure with the work, or to continue and say this is the best. I think there's that level of doubt that doesn't exist later that allows you to be able to go back and be sure and say, yeah, that's good.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah. So for those people who are out there who are still with us during this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely hope you've taken it to task in terms of your own work to take a look and see what you photographed a year ago, see what you photographed 2 years ago, see what you photographed 5 years ago, if you've been photographing that long. Revisit those images to see what they mean to you and what they hold for you now. And if there's an option to bring them forward into today with the same gusto that you had when you photographed them, or with a different vision of how you would use that image, I think it would behoove you to do that. because if you're not using your archive to archive valuable images that you have reverence for and possibilities for further use, then there's no need for the archive if you don't plan to use them. And like Greg said, they're not sure if they're not shared.
No, I don't know. Well, I don't know if there's no use for the archive. I mean, it's a learning tool. I mean, Greg mentioned did you see the contact sheet of those photographs? I mean, that's a very important archive, which quite honestly, I think in the digital age, we really don't have a lot of people who are doing things in that way. There are, volumes of photographs being created, but within those volumes of photographs being created, all of the sketch work that goes into that, all the thumbnails, all the thought processes are being shown. I think one of the wonderful things about a contact sheet is you can see the process, even if it's the model doing this, the model doing that, moving this, doing that, doing this, doing that. And then boom, you go, that's the shot with the projector room image over the right-hand shoulder or whatever it is. And then that's how you get the idea that you want to convey in the final image. But when you see that contact sheet, you see everything they went through in a sitting, or even when they're walking around taking pictures. Oh, I spent 5 minutes in front of the ice cream truck taking pictures of people buying ice cream. Oh, then I walked down the block and there were kids in the hydrant. I spent a half an hour with kids in the hydrant. Oh, then I walked down the block some more and there were people playing basketball. I took photos of the basketball play. Then I went down the block some more. Oh, there were people having a cookout. Then there were some more people playing dominoes. Oh, then there were some more people washing cars. There were like 5 people washing 5 cars. And you can walk down a summer street, and with a contact sheet, you can see all that. But I think in the digital age, we don't really get to see that. We see the kids look as the ice cream drops off the tongue depression, the ice cream stick. And, we see the kid doing this and the ice cream getting ready to hit the ground. We see, the one kid making a face as they get hit with water, like right under the chin. We see, all these images. We see the isolated final cut, so to speak. But we don't have, I think if people have archives, I wouldn't say anyone should have to keep them. It's an individual choice, but I think there is value in at least showing or retaining a good number of outtakes, because I think those outtakes provide valuable lessons for those who come after us. And I am a big believer that culture should continue to grow in its collective knowledge.
Okay. There was something that Greg had mentioned before, which he alluded to, which is if you stood around waiting for the shot, but you missed the shot, but you got everything except the shot, are those other ones except the shot really worth it to keep it?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what. I'll give you a perfect example. If you're photographing a wedding, right? Yes, you have to get the ring. Yes, you have to get the kiss. Yes, there are some photographs you must get.
Right.
But if you photograph, let's say if you photograph the groom dancing with his mother at the wedding, right? That's part at the reception, right? And you get her, reaching up to kiss him on the forehead because that's her only son getting married, right? You get that photo, but then let's say you go to you check the photo, and then instead of that, she takes her hand and pats him on the head too, right? But she only does that once during the reception. Now, you may get it, you may not. Now, this has never happened to me, but unless that's something that's very, very special to them, right? And she said, "Oh, did you catch when I patted him on the head?" Right? Because I always did that from the time he was a baby, whenever he did good. Most people are not going to give you grief if that particular instance wasn't photographed. If you got the kiss on the forehead, because that's more important. A kiss on the forehead has a greater general understanding. And it may have just been one pat. Oh, I pat him one on top of his head. I did that from the time he was 3 weeks old. Every time he did something good, instead of a star, I'd pat him on his head. And if they don't tell you in the beginning that that's a shot that has to be gotten, they don't give you grief. They won't, because, some people will, but they'll say, did you catch that? I always did that. And you can honestly say, well, I had no idea that was super important. I got the kiss. I did that. I'm so sorry I did that. Now, I'm not saying one should give an excuse, but that's an extreme example of the kind of thing that can happen where you miss something. It is important to them. You probably should have gotten it, but there's nothing you can do. Right. And it's probably the worst possible example because it's an interaction between a mother and a child. But I bring something like that up to say that you try to win the most you can. You try to pay as much attention as you can. And you try to make sure that when you take your picture, you don't drop the camera until after the dance is done, so that anything that happens, whether it's a pat on the head or whether she just sort of does like a chin to the, a fist to the chin every time you did something good in a mock thing, you get it. Right. That's about preparedness and professionalism. But there are times when
I think you're missing his point, but go ahead.
No, but what I'm getting, well, I think what Mark has brought to the conversation is valuable, and I think what I would want to clarify is that I think there are certain goals and certain things that you would do in a commercial setting where you're being paid for something versus where you're taking artistic merit on your own and choosing your own artistic merits to do something that is not necessarily a project or a job that you're working for someone to give the final output to. If it's all dependent on your own vision, right, as an artist, or something that you're working on in your own personal project, which is for the most part what I'm working on, then it's a different mindset that I would be doing in terms of a different set of aesthetics or a different set of editing. And you would edit in camera, not necessarily edit at home when you've edited your film or your digital. Now, of course, that's changed nowadays because the ability to just record images is so just much faster than they've ever been with film.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess what I was kind of getting to, I never got to because Greg's right, I did get off track, is that with all those different things that happen, before you'd have a contact sheet that would include all the things I mentioned, plus some things in between. Here in the digital world, we'd have, the pat on the head, the kiss on the forehead, and then none of the stuff that happened in between, it didn't mean anything. It never sees the light of day. And I think what's gone from the contact sheet is the ability to look at contact sheets and go, select. Even if you take a roll of 24 color negative film and you take it to Photomat, they're no longer in business, and you get your pack of prints back and the negatives are all cut up in paper.
Right.
Being able to kind of look through every image in that way. Those prints still exist in the physical world, where if you just hand everybody the pack and you say, well, these are the 5 I like, I put an X on the back of them, everyone sees the whole. It's a complete work. And I think there are sort of these image silos that we have now, where only the best shows, or only what we perceive to be the best shows ever.
Well, yeah. Greg, anything else? Okay.
Nah, I'm good.
All right.
Golly, I thought we were going to talk about social media. Okay. Well,
no.
We did.
It's about this. So,
we did.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't even talk about the fact that I did have something to say about social media that I wanted to say, but no, I was going to say one of the crazy things about social media. I just kind of are we going to talk about social media or not?
Not now.
Not now.
Conversation.
Oh man, that means I got to keep this background up. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, well, yes, we'll do that another time.
Okay.
All right. Listen, I'll close it out here. All right, and we can sort of table this discussion for now, because I'm not sure if it's ever ended. I think it can always be reevaluated, and we can discuss it even more at a future date. And so, but I think we've given viewers and whoever chimed in here enough information to go away with something, even if it's just questioning their own work. If anyone out there has any questions about what we've discussed, leave a comment in the comment section of the video, and we'll be happy to get back to you and discuss further. If there's a question of a long importance, then we can actually get back to it in another video. All right? Okay, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Good night.